In this edition of Jules Voto's Photo Focus, I will be wrapping up my normal lens tournament. So there's a lot to do, so let's get right into it. We're now going to be going into round 2. There are 12 lenses left, and we will start with group 1. And the first 2 lenses are the 50mm 1.4 Z mount Nikkor. That is a 1 seed, going up against the 55mm 1.7 MC Rokkor, a 9 seed. So let's get going right away here. At 1.4, obviously the widest aperture for the Minolta is 1.7, so I compared that to 1.4 on the Nikkor, and the Nikkor is much sharper. At 2.0 versus 1.7, again, the Nikkor, of course, is even better. Now, we're looking at a lens from 1970 going up against a lens from 2024, so it's understandable. At 2.8, it's closer in the center. The Nikkor still comes out on top. And at 4.0, it gets close. And by 5.6, these lenses are very close. And at f8, there's really no way to distinguish between them. So I would say up to 2.8, the Nikkor is clearly better, sharper, more contrast from center to edge. At 4, they're close, and then after that, they're pretty much indistinguishable. So as far as bokeh, it is better on the Nikkor, but we're looking at a lens with 9 aperture blades. So I think the Minolta performed very well. However, the Nikkor moves on. All right, next we're looking at the Canon 50mm 1.4 FD. This is the original 1971 FD lens, very solidly made, very heavy lens. This is seeded number 2, and this is going up against the number 6 seed, the Nikkor 50mm 2.0 AI. Now the Nikkor is multi-coated, the Canon is not. The Canon lens is sharp right from the get-go, right from 1.4, little low on contrast at 1.4, but that was common for lenses of that era. At 2.0, the Canon picks up some contrast, is sharper than the Nikkor at 2.0. The edges are actually fairly close. At 2.8, the the Canon is better. Better at 4.0, and they're very close across the frame at 5.6. Bokeh is better on the Canon. It has 8 aperture blades where the Nikkor has 6. So the Canon moves on, not unexpected. Okay, and now to complete Group 1, Round 2, we have the number 3 seed, the 50mm 1.4 Rokkor X, going up against the number 5 seed, the 50mm 1.8 AFD Nikkor. This is an autofocus lens from 2002. The D version is from 2002. The original lens came out in 1986, and optically they are virtually the same. So both are multi-coated. The Rokkor at 1.4 has decent sharpness across the frame, and like the Canon previously, it's lower contrast, wide open. At 1.4 versus 1.8 on the Nikkor, the Rokkor is close in the center, but much better as we get to the edges. At 2.0, the Rokkor is still better, especially away from center. Excuse me. At 2.8, same thing. And the same thing at f4. And at 5.6, both lenses are very sharp across the frame. As far as bokeh, I would give the edge to the Nikkor, but that's my personal opinion. You have to judge for yourself. And let me just repeat what I said in the previous videos in this lens tournament. all these test images are available for download. You could view them, download them. I will put a link in the description below to all these final 12 lenses. Okay, so the Rokkor moves on. All right, so now let's go to group 2, round 2, and we're going to start with the Canon 50mm 1.4 new FD. This lens is from 1979, much lighter than the version from 1971. This is a number 1 seed in round 2. It has an 8-blade aperture. This is going up against a 1973 Nikkor, the 50mm 2.0 pre-AI HC. So this is also multi-coated. Both these lenses are multi-coated. And at 1.4, of course, we're just looking at the Canon, and Nikkor starts at 2.0. Good sharpness across the frame, typical lower contrast, but again, very comparable to the 1971 version. At 2.0, the Canon picks up better contrast, and it is sharper across the frame against the Nikkor. This lens has a very good reputation. None of this is surprising how well it's doing. At 2.8, still, the Canon is sharper across the frame. The center is close at f4. The edge still goes to the Canon. And at 5.6, pretty difficult to tell the difference. I think there's a little bit better contrast with the Canon, and I think the Canon has better bokeh. So the Canon moves on. Now we go to the number 2 seed in group 2, round 2. We have the AFS Nikkor 50mm 1.8G going up against another Canon lens, the new FD 50mm 1.8. And both these lenses are multi-coated. At 1.8, I would give a slight edge in sharpness to the Canon with a slight edge in contrast to the Nikkor. At 2.8, they're very close. Again, a slight edge to the Canon at the edges. At f4, very close. Again, slight edge to the Canon. At 5.6, they're pretty close. I would say the edge to the Canon at the edges, and the bokeh is better on the Canon. But again, a personal choice. So the Canon moves on. This was an inexpensive lens. Okay, so now we go to the final duo in group 2, round 2. We have the number 3 seed, the Nikkor 50mm 1.4 AIS, going up against the 58mm 1.4 MC Rokkor. Now, the Nikkor is a much newer lens from 81. The Rokkor is from 1969. The Nikkor is multi-coated. The Rokkor is not. And one thing, as I continue with this, on the left edge, and I noticed this in the previous comparisons, the Nikkor is not as sharp as on the right edge. It's most likely due to some decentering on this lens. And this is a very well-made lens. However, it does seem to be decentered. I bought this lens used. It's in excellent condition physically. It looks fine. So I'm a little surprised at that, but let's just continue. In the center, the Nikkor is sharper at 1.4. At the edge, on the left side, the Rokkor is. On the right, the Nikkor is. And this pretty much continues throughout. The Nikkor is sharper at f2. At f2.8, it's a little closer. And it's really a tough call here, but I'm going to give the edge to the Nikkor. Now, some might say, well, it's because you're a Nikon shooter. No, not at all. It's because this lens is sharper, wide open at the wider apertures. And as I have always said, you buy a 1.4 lens to shoot it wide open or stop down a little. if you wanted to shoot at 5.6 or f8, you could buy a cheaper 1.8 or f2 lens. So I give the slight edge to the Nikkor, but I'm a little disappointed in its performance, and I was in the previous comparisons with this, but it does move on. Okay, so we now come down to round 3, the final 6 lenses. And the way we're going to do this, we have 3 lenses in group 1, 3 lenses in group 2. We're just going to compare them all together. And so in group 1 in round 3, we have the number 1 seed, the Nikkor 50mm 1.4Z versus the Canon FD 50mm 1.4 from 71. This is a 2 seed. And then finally, we have the Rokkor 50mm 1.4. This is a 3 seed, the Rokkor X. And then we're going to go to round 3, group 2. We have the Canon FD. We have the 50mm, which is a 1 seed. We have the 3 seed, the Nikon 50mm 1.4 AIS. And we have the 50mm 1.8 Canon FD. So in the final 6, we have 3 Canon lenses, 2 Nikon lenses, and 1 Minolta. Okay, so let's start with group 1, round 3. We have the Nikkor 50mm 1.4Z, and I would give that the edge in the center and the edge to the other 2, to both the Rokkor and the Canon 50mm 1.4 FD from 71. At 2.0, basically the same thing. The Nikkor has the edge. At 2.8, I'm going to give it to the Nikkor again. The edges are very close. Actually, I think the Canon has a slight edge at the edge at 2.8. At f4, in the center, I think the Rokkor has a slight edge. Really close as you stop these lenses down. So I will rate them at f4 as the Rokkor as number 1, the Nikkor as number 2, and the Canon number 3. At 5.6, it's virtually a tie, maybe a slight edge at the edge to the Rokkor. So the Nikon wins this mainly because of its performance at 1.4, at 2.0, and 2.8. So the Nikkor makes it to the final 2, to the final round. Now we're going to look at group 2, round 3. And again, we have the Canon FD, we have the Nikkor AIS, and we have the Canon 50mm 1.8 FD. And wide open at 1.4, Canon comes in number 1. Actually, it comes in number 1 at 1.4, at 2, and 2.8. Clearly sharper in the center. Again, as I said before, the right edge on the Nikkor is excellent. They're very close there, but the left edge has the edge to the Canon. And we're looking at an inexpensive lens here, the 50mm 1.8 Canon FD, but it does very well wide open. In fact, at 4.0, the Nikon and the Canon are very close in the center, and this is very close as well. Once we get to 5.6, I would say the 2 Canon lenses are identical, and the Nikkor probably the same, again, except for that left edge. So not a difficult decision here. The Canon FD 51.4 moves on until the final round. Now let me just say, as I said in the last comparison in round 3 of the other 3 lenses, once you stop these lenses down to 5.6, they are all very, very close. So if you need the speed, if you need good performance at the wider apertures, you're going to want to go with one of these 1.4s. If you normally shoot outdoors or indoors with flash, where you're shooting at 5.6 or f8, or you're shooting landscapes at f11, these 51.8s will do the job just fine. Okay, so now the final comparison, the final 2. And let's see who comes out first. All right, so again, we have the 50 1.4Z going up against the 50 millimeter 1.4 new FD. We have a 9-bladed aperture on the Nikkor. This is a 2024 lens, okay? Going up against an 8-bladed FD from 1979. So there's a big age difference here. And at wide open, at 1.4, the centers are close, but away from center, the Nikkor is clearly better. Same thing at f2. I would give the Nikkor a slight edge in the center. At 2.8, the center's the same. Again, the Nikkor has a slight edge at 2.8. However, once we get to f4, it was impossible really for me to tell the difference between these two lenses. So I got to give the edge to the Nikkor, so the Nikkor wins this, but the Canon does extremely well. Again, we are comparing lenses that are years, decades apart. So it's a pretty amazing performance for this Canon. It has an excellent reputation. I have used this lens in the past and always was very pleased with its performance. Very smooth focus. You know, if you like to manual focus, prefer not using autofocus, the the Canon easily wins, although the newer Nikon Z mount lenses, the manual focus is very smooth on them. All right, let me just repeat what I said earlier. All the test results, so you could see for yourself, both the bokeh test, the sharpness test, are all in the description below. There's a link there to all these lenses, so you could go ahead and compare them for yourself. And if you disagree with me, fine, let me know. Tell me what you think. You know, you go a little crazy here looking back and forth, looking at 1.4 at the center, at the edge, then looking at the other lens and lining them up side by side. And it gets a little crazy. It's possible I could have made some mistakes here, so look for yourself, let me know what you think. Okay, so finally, as I evaluated my test results, I realized, and I knew this going in, of course, but all these lenses were shot under the same exact conditions. I did not move my lighting, I did not move my tripod, I did not move anything in the test setup, and each lens was tested exactly the same, at the same apertures, at the same exposure. And the thing is, though, these lenses were tested about 8.5 feet from the test setup. They may perform differently at infinity, or closer, or a little further away. And this isn't a real life situation. So the best way to evaluate a lens, I believe, is to take it out into the world and shoot the type of things that you want to shoot. If you're a portrait photographer, shoot portraits. If you're a landscape photographer, shoot landscapes, and so forth. So while this is a comparison of each of these lenses at about an 8.5 foot distance, it is not a true comparison of how these lenses will perform in the real world. So just keep that in mind and evaluate them, evaluate my test results for yourself. And again, let me know what you think. And I think in the future, this was really tedious to do this. It got a little crazy. It took much longer than I thought it would. And I honestly don't know how valuable these test results may be to you. When I go out with a lens, I've done this quite a few times, let's say a 28 millimeter lens, and shoot with it, and I shoot various things, do a walk around with it. There's nothing to compare it to. So that's why I thought this might be good, because now you're seeing basically side-by-side comparisons of these lenses. However, I think I'm going to continue to do what I did before for the most part. And if I go out with a 50 millimeter lens, show the results. I would like to do a comparison side by side in the real world situation, but that's kind of difficult because now you take a shot, if it's a building, okay, you take a shot of the building, take that lens off, put the other lens on, take the same shot. But if you're doing other things, people pictures, walk around pictures, landscape pictures, the light could change in a moment's notice. I don't know how valuable that is looking at the side-by-side type comparison. So I don't know. Tell me what you think, what you prefer. I'm doing this for myself, sort of, just to see what my best lens is, what lens I may want to choose. But it's also a big part of this is for you. So it could help you make a determination as to what lens you may want to buy. So let me know what you think. You want to see more real-world situations? You want to see more side-by-side situations? And I value your opinions and your advice, and I would love to hear from you. So leave your comments in the comments below. I always try to respond to all questions and all comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I usually publish a new video every Monday morning and Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon.